Komal, am I audible and visible clearly?
Yes, Ishan, you are audible.
All right. A very good morning, everyone. My name is Ishan Chatterjee, and I am the president of Nimbus, the English Debating Society of ARST College, Delhi University. On behalf of my entire core team, I'd like to welcome all of you who are present here to attend the first ever ARSD Nimbus Youth Summit of 2021. ARSD is a premier educational institute of Delhi University. Accredited the grade A by NAC, our college currently ranks at the 13th position by NIRF in the All India College rankings. In Delhi University, we hold the 7th position out of all the colleges in it. Students from ARSD are not only rank holders within the university, but also there are people going for international sports, going for making changes in various other fields such as business, entrepreneurship, filmmaking, literature, and whatnot. Nimbus is one such society that a college has to offer, and it is a tier 1 society. Nimbus was first founded in 2006, and ever since its inception, Nimbus has been working effectively towards creating a very strong environment of development. We have organized various events at both intra-college level and inter-college level. For example, we have organized conventional debates, Model United Nation Conference, from which we have our flagship event, ARSD Youth Conclave. We have also organized webinars, various educational webinars, and therefore we also organize not only these national level competitions and webinars, but also our very first international debate last semester, which received participation from not only within India, but from Paris, France, from Jakarta, from Java Barat, Indonesia, from Japan, from Minnesota, United States, from San Francisco, United States, and as well as Dubai. Nimbus also has a very strong network of alumni who are doing extremely well in their lives. For example, we have Yashdeep Chahal, who is also the ex-president of Nimbus and has currently secured the rank 1 in Delhi Judicial Service Examinations. Darpan Mago is currently serving the PR department, is handling the PR department at EESL Government of India. We also have Sri Hari, who ranked 44th in IIT JAM examinations. We also have many others. This shows that people in Nimbus are not only focused towards their academics, but also they want to develop their skill sets, thereby showing a very holistic development in themselves. But all this is possible because of the supporting pillars that we have. One such pillar is our convener, Dr. Shubha Dwivedi ma'am. I would now like to call out Dr. Shubha Dwivedi ma'am to kindly address the gathering and welcome our principal, Professor Dr. Gyantosh Jha sir. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ishan. We cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. Franklin D. Roosevelt said these words. With these words of Franklin D. Roosevelt, friends, distinguished guest speakers, colleagues, and dear students, I welcome all of you to the first ever ARST Virtual Youth Summit 2021. It's an ode to all the brilliant minds of our country who believe in the power of knowledge, discourse, and discussion. It's a platform for the young students to come together and get inspired for the future roles and challenges. This one-day event with its 6 plenary sessions, my dear friends, will focus on a wide range of interesting topics, including human rights, media, literature, entrepreneurship, law, innovation, technology, leadership, and so on and so forth, which are key areas for the youth to shape the future. We are immensely delighted to have received more than 150 inspired delegates for this event. The idea of such a summit or conference arose from the suggestion of our visionary principal, Professor Dr. Gyantosh Jha, who suggested that such an event could help develop the youth of our country into globally competitive and globally competent individuals, who with their globalectical imagination could forge connections into different fields of life, who would connect the local with the global, and who would find their way through dialectical maze with thesis, antithesis, and synthesis of ideas. Today's Youth Summit combines the global and the dialectical through a mutually affecting dialogue or multilogue. Globally competent students would weigh and consider multiplicity, pluralism, and heterogeneity in perspectives, cultures, and beliefs. This Youth Summit, my dear friends, is all about amplifying voices of young leaders and having constructive dialogues. It's going to enable all of you to embrace wholeness, interconnectedness, interdisciplinarity, equality, and potentiality of parts, tension, and motion. In a rather freewheeling manner, the conversations would unfold the power of the youth and the endless possibilities they have within themselves. From early times, ancient Indian writings have been talking about the importance of debates and discussions. Vade vade jayate tattva. Deliberations are beneficial for self-knowledge. And in present times, worldwide, we see that educationists, in order to reinvent and reinvigorate education system, talk about using debate as the new classroom tool for civility and social justice. So we see the importance of conversations and discussions in the classrooms and outside the classrooms in the larger world. Today's Youth Summit, you are going to see the convergence of both Eastern thought and Western experience in a technologically enabled environment. As they say, every crisis is an opportunity in disguise. So we are making the best of the post-pandemic world by having this Youth Summit on a virtual platform. And it is going to be powered by extended conversations by most enlightened experts of different fields. Nimbus, my dear friends, has had an incredible journey of bringing youth for debates, dialogues, and discussions. We have been organizing ARSD Youth Conclave, our spectacular event from the last several years. And today's event is an extension of that glorious tradition. I, Dr. Shubha Dwivedi, on behalf of the organizing team, welcome all the attendees, delegates, distinguished speakers who have all come together to facilitate this great conference of ideas. Hoping that by participating in today's sessions, you'll be able to adapt and contribute knowledge and understanding to a world that is constantly, rapidly evolving. With a profound sense of gratitude, I welcome webinar committee convener, Dr. Vinita Tuli, for all the support. A hearty welcome to all the delegates. A cordial welcome to all my colleagues and members of the organizing team, Ms. Maushami Ray, Dr. Rosie Sinha, Dr. Inaugural Jha, who share the passion of igniting the flame of knowledge with love, labor, and skill. And now, to initiate the conversation for the Youth Summit, I first invite our dynamic principal, Professor Gyantosh Jha, to welcome our speakers for today's event. Sir, may we have you here? Yes.
Sir is here.
Ishan, you need to mute, sir. I think sir is muted. Sir, we can't hear you. We can't hear, sir.
Wait, I'll just check. You are the
Hello,
co-host.
जी sir. जी sir. वो कर रहे हैं sir वो.
Sir, done.
हाँ हाँ sir.
We have made you the co-host and also enabled your mic.
Ishan, hurry up.
Sir, your mic is, yeah, it's working.
You have muted me and you are telling me to speak. How can I? Anyway, you should take care before starting the program. I have joined before 10. You should see that I have joined. Anyway, good morning to all. Esteemed guests for this Youth Summit, colleagues, and my dear student. On behalf of Atmaram Sanatan Dharma College, I welcome all the distinguished speakers for this Youth Summit. In fact, I am very pleased and proud to be addressing in the presence of such esteemed members from diverse fields, because I believe that students of our college should get opportunity and should be provided many platforms for their holistic development. That is why we have started some years ago our youth conclave. But this year, due to pandemic, we are unable to organize this program in physical mode, and it was perhaps not possible for the members to organize in virtual mode. That is why I thought that there should be some summit and there should be organized by the debating society so that we can invite speakers from diverse field and they can interact, our student can interact with the experts of different and diverse field. I believe in them in democratic values. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe that debating and discussion is very necessary for a healthy society. I believe that our students should be provided that opportunity to interact with the experts from various fields so that they can gather best knowledge from them and they can enrich their knowledge and their wisdom. So that was the plan to organize this kind of summit. Uh, and our college has always felicitated the possibility of discourse and conversation of any topic, and our debating society takes it a further step every year with their events and seminars. I would like to welcome all members of today's JRST Youth Summit, which is first of its kind and promise to be empowering in every sense. Professor Indu Agnihotri, who has contributed in a large way towards women development studies during her directorship at CWDS and by the virtue of her penmanship on various articles. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Meetu Khosla and thank her for playing a crucial part in raising awareness of mental health. I welcome our one of distinguished alumnus, Mr. Sanjay Basak, and I appreciate that we are addressing a crucial aspect of human rights, as I believe that freedom of speech is at a core essence of our event today. So I welcome Basak Sahab, and I welcome RJ Mahek, I welcome Ms. Meenakshi Reddy, Dr. Shruti Jain. Once again, I welcome you all. My best wishes to the organizers, Dr. Shubha Dwivedi and her team, and the office bearer of our debating society members. I hope that you are going to have a kind of fun and a kind of thoughtful event in this process, and you will learn more and more. All the best wishes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your unstinted support and guidance at all times possible. We are grateful for this learning opportunity, which is one of the many and which you have been constantly providing us despite all kinds of turbulences and difficulties. And now I would hand it over to Ishan Chatterjee.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir, for your kind support that we have received, for which we are now possible to organize this event. Before moving forward with the event, it is imperative for us to know the rules and regulations for the event, right? So the rules of the summit are quite simple. Any sort of cuss words, irrelevant questions, politically motivated questions will not be entertained whatsoever. You have to write down the questions and direct them only towards me, that is Ishan Chatterjee, the host of the meeting. The questions cannot be directed to any other person in this meeting. The questions should directly come to me. We will filter out the questions that we find relevant and important for our speakers to answer. And then after filtering those questions, the questions will be asked by the moderators only. So that means the attendees are not required to turn on their mics. Therefore, the questions will be put forward to our respective speakers by the set of moderators that we have for that session. We have cash prizes and certificates for the best interjection from each session, which means we have 6 sessions in total. Therefore, 6 different cash prizes and 6 different certificates. So do adhere to the rules. Before posting any question, write down your complete full name, then your phone number for us to recognize, and then write down your question, complete question. The question should be short and crisp and should not be a lengthy paragraph. Therefore, these are the rules you should adhere by. These are very simple rules, and please follow them for this Youth Summit of ARSD 2021. Now, we like to begin with our first session, and for that, I'd like to call Karina Monga and our next moderator, Anoushka Kalra, to hand over. Anoushka Kalra and Karina Monga, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ishan. All right, I'm Anoushka Kalra. I'm a second year student of Nimbus, the English Debating Society of ARST College. I'm pursuing political science honors. Over to you, Karina.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karina Munga, and I'm also a second year BCom honors student and second year Nimbus student as well. So, starting with, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Professor Indu Agnihotri. She is a women's studies scholar with a special interest in history and the women's movement in India. She retired as Director, Center for Women's Development Studies, New Delhi. She completed her PhD in history from the esteemed Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Agnihotri specializes in the fields of gender and history, the women's movement in India, and developing a women's studies program at the center. She was also the journal guest editor for In Memoriam, Neera Desai, a special section of the Indian Journal of Gender Studies. Along with that, she has multiple publications to her name, both at national and international level. Ma'am, it is an honor to have you speak as a speaker for our Youth Summit.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, ARST. Thank you, Professor Gyantosh Jha, Shubha Dwivedi, who has been in touch with me about this program. Congratulations to the students and to Nimbus for this Youth Summit 21. One always misses the real physical interaction, especially if one has been in teaching and been interacting with young minds. It is always a bit of a challenge to speak to a screen, even if the screen is alive with more images and faces, but it is still a challenge. So I'll try to overcome that. I think it's very important that we're having this discussion. I would have liked it to be more interactive. Let us see how much we can do with that. I was asked to speak around the theme of gendering social change, contemporary debates and challenges. When I approach this subject today, I would like to begin by focusing on a document. I'm a student of history and a teacher of history, so I do refer to documents and the past much more so. I would like to begin by referring to a document which all of us are familiar with, which in a way governs our life, and yet which, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
extremely sorry to interrupt. I
Yeah.
think the video is off right now.
Oh, I
Yes,
see.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Extremely
Okay.
sorry to interrupt, ma'am. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Fine. Is that better?
Yes, ma'am, you're visible now.
Okay. Okay. So, what I'm saying is that I begin with a document which governs our life in every possible way, and yet which we don't usually sort of refer to it personally in our lives. And that is the Constitution. And I would just draw attention to the preamble of the Constitution,
I think ma'am is facing a network trouble from her end.
Yeah, looks like.
Are other participants connected properly? Can the other participants hear me?
Yes, we can, Ishan.
Okay, So then ma'am is facing some trouble.
Yeah, I think her
Yeah.
internet is lagging. Let's just wait for her to come back.
All
Until then, I would just like to reiterate once again that if any of the members who are attending the seminar have any questions for the current speaker, you can please send it to Ishan Chatterjee, who is also the host of the meeting, and send it to him personally. So when you go to the chat box, you can send to everyone, or you can send it to Ishan Chatterjee as well. So send it to him personally, and then we will ask your questions at the end of the meeting.
Anushka, if it is possible, then since ma'am is not able to join right now, then why
Yeah,
don't we take up this topic with the participants and maybe ask them to write down their views on this?
sure, definitely. We
Maybe
can
you
do
can
that.
talk about
Yeah, this, Anushka, just I think we need to, give a recap to all the people who have joined in late. Friends, the first session interrogates the concept of gender, and it dismantles generally held perceptions and offers a broad conceptual understanding of social change and the impact of politics, religion, patriarchy, and other social paradigms in the gender discourse. And we are privileged to have Dr. Indu Agnihotri, ex-director CWDS, with us for the first plenary session with us. She's facing some technical glitch because of which she lost touch with us, but she is coming back soon. And ma'am doesn't need any introduction. She has been a very active person throughout her engagement with gender studies, with the gender discourse, and her scholarly renditions have made a huge impact in the field of gender studies. So all of you can stay tuned in while we wait for her to join back. Let me just see. Yes, ma'am, could you join back?
Until then, all participants can start sending in their questions to Ishan or even on the group chat right now, so we can just have a small discussion until ma'am joins back. I will state the topic once more. It's gendering social change, contemporary debates and challenges.
Okay, students, Indu ma'am is with us. So, yes, ma'am. Can you, someone has to unmute her.
Ishan, can we look into this? I think ma'am doesn't have the right to unmute right now.
Ishan?
Yes, I've given her the permission to unmute and I've made her the co-host as well.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, we
Okay.
can.
Okay, sorry. So I'm going to go straight in. Why was I referring to the preamble or the constitution? Because I think the document, in a way, it is a resolve for social change. The document itself, because India in 1947 was a deeply divided society. Both colonial policy as well as earlier histories had given us an inheritance of tremendous, very entrenched inequalities, social hierarchies, deep divisions in society in terms of caste, class, and poverty and inequality were staring us in the face in 1947 when we moved towards freedom. And those debates in the Constituent Assembly reflect the recognition of these divisions. And I think the fact that not only was the freedom struggle against imperialism, but it was also against the feudal stranglehold and the princely states, which sort of bolstered a feudal hierarchical system. And it was recognition of that which is reflected both in the debates as well as the objectives, the statement of objectives, the goals that are set out. Why I'm referring to all this is because somewhere there is a discussion today and it continues about foreigners, foreign rule. But the content of imperialism, the content of feudalism in terms of social structures and the stranglehold of these structures on Indian society was something which was identified by the freedom struggle as a very conscious element which had to be opposed, whose policies had to be undermined, whose strength had to be undermined. These also directly impacted the lives of women as well as, of course, men, and they, in a sense, set out the parameters within which social relations were established, social interaction happened. Therefore, my argument is that it is not that some of us want change because we want to improve our lives. What I'm saying is, of course, we all want change in our lives. That is a universal objective, it's a universal goal, it's a universal engagement, and all of us have a right to do that. But what I'm saying is that our document, the basic document of the Constitution, is itself a pledge to change and to move towards equality, which also includes gender equality. So I would like to emphasize that aspect because somewhere when we talk about change, especially when the youth talks about change, there is a sense of discomfort amongst people, as if we want to sort of upset the existing correlations. Now, it is not for us to upset correlations. There are ongoing processes. There is a huge process of social change which is ongoing. When the women's movement intervenes in that, it intervenes to say that this change should not be only along the lines of being anti-women, but in fact, we would like to propel the change to be more friendly, gender equal, and as I say, engendered or sort of gender sensitive in terms of the way the changes are coming, the direction in which it is going. Now, one of the primary sort of spheres in which change is happening all the time, and where women are in a sense unequal partners, if at all, in that progress, is the sphere of development. And that is why from the 1930s committee, the women's role in a planned economy, to the committee on status of women in India in the early 1970s, to more recent committees, official bodies, etc., there has been recognition that for women's status to change and for any meaningful sort of shifts in the indicators, we have to engage with the social developmental policies. And I think in more recent years, particularly the last few decades, since the 90s, that has become all the more clear. Because whereas up to the 70s and 80s, we were more in a mode of state-led, state-sponsored development and a kind of intervention on behalf of the state. The 90s have seen what we call the opening up of the economy, the neoliberal order, globalization, which have in a sense given a bigger handle to the market forces. Now, in popular mindsets, this opening up of society is seen as a more friendly, socially friendly setup. The fact is that the impact of these policies is actually quite the contrary, and particularly in the lives of women. And women of the sort of women, when I'm talking about in a majority sense, not majority in majoritarian, but that the vast mass of women and their lives have in fact been affected much more adversely and in very specific ways. And I would first point to, so we have of course a set of indicators, all of you know those points. I'm not going to go into data because there won't be time, but I would talk of one specific indicator which is a key indicator in terms of women's status, and that is women and work. Now, throughout the world, economists tended to see globalization and neoliberal policies and the opening up of the economy with new opportunities for work, and also, as a well-known economist, Guy Standing, talked about it as the feminization of labor. So the understanding was that these policies will move towards greater employment for women. Now, I'm not an expert on other countries, but the data on India clearly shows that no such feminization is happening. And if there is any level of feminization, and you know, feminization sounds very good. That is the most enticing part about such vocabularies. So, you know, when we say feminization, we tend to think, oh, this is pro-women. But what I'm saying is, what is happening in terms of feminization today is the feminization of poverty. There has been a clear feminization of agriculture, which the Economic Survey of 1995 talked about. And agriculture is one of the least developing, low developing, a crisis-ridden sector for the last 25 years. I don't have to say more on it. The result of that is visible in and around the National Capital Region and all the states of India where farmers are protesting. That the discussion here is not on the politics of that agitation. The discussion is that we need to recognize that a major sector of the Indian economy where women are predominantly sort of concentrated, and even as per 2011 census, a larger section of women live in rural India, even though there is a very fast pace of change and a lot of migration of women happening. Now, if that is where women are, and if that sector is in a crisis, then the lives of women are also in a crisis. If suicides are happening on a big scale, these suicides are affecting the women in those families. They're affecting their rights because the recognition, or rather the non-recognition of women as farmers, leads to further crisis because they're unable to get out of the debt syndrome. They're unable to get the benefits that the state announces to farmers because they're technically not registered, they're not recognized, they're not defined to be farmers, whereas women are critically involved in a major part of the agricultural operations except for plowing. Why am I talking about it? What I'm saying is that when we talk about change in the lives of women and engendering processes of social change, we have to look at where women are, how they are, where are those lives being lived out in real sense. The other is that in urban India, and there has been a faster pace of urbanization over the last few decades, where are they? They are in the poorest occupations, poorest livelihood options that are available. Not only that, there has been a feminization of the low paid, unorganized, informal sector jobs. Kerala, which first started seeing the sort of phenomena of educated unemployment, because if you get educated, your expectations in terms of your jobs also go up. But if those kind of jobs which you would like to go for are not available, then this section of women may actually withdraw from the workforce, not because it's a voluntary withdrawal, it is a forced withdrawal because the kind of options, the kind of jobs, the employment women are looking for and the terms on which employment is available are not suitable. They're not appropriate to their social skills, the skills that they have acquired, and this phenomena is increasing. We are refusing so far to recognize the crisis of unemployment and the crisis of unemployment vis-a-vis women more so. The fact that even during the pandemic, and my colleagues at CWDS, Neeta, Indrani Mazumdar, have been writing about it since 2007 categorically about the crisis of employment and unemployment for women. But during the pandemic, for instance, Ashwini Deshpande has looked at the latest PLFS data, the labor force survey data, the primary labor force survey, and shown that many more women have lost jobs. Now, what happens when women lose jobs? I mean, is it that everything goes on normal, it's all hunky-dory? Does that happen? No. The decline in economic status has other ramifications, and in any case are other indicators, except for the indicator on education, which has been a slightly positive spiral graph through the years of independence. Even that during the pandemic may have led to very serious hiccups, but on sex ratios, particularly on child sex ratios, our census data is very clear, and the 2021 census will make it even clearer. The National Family Health Survey data makes it very clear where women's health stands, where infant mortality, child mortality, maternal mortality stand. And all indications are that the pandemic has made all these situations and all these poor indicators more at risk in terms of any kind of progressive development. The crime and violence situation, I don't even have to talk about it. I think your generation knows it better than any of us. My question then is that there is clearly a material aspect, a structural social aspect to the adversities, the vulnerabilities, the inequalities that women suffer from, and these are not separate from the larger social order. It's not as if only women are suffering from inequality or prejudice. There are inequalities which are affecting all of us, men and women. It's just that in terms of women, these inequalities and prejudices play out in a very specific manner, and also that women are at the receiving end of these vulnerable prejudices in very specific ways because there is a patriarchal order. Now, in debates and discussions, particularly where the youth are involved and where phenomena which directly affect the lives of youth are concerned, there is a focus, much greater focus on mindsets, on attitudes. Why I'm emphasizing this aspect of development processes and the violence inherent and the prejudices inherent in the development processes is because I do believe, and I think there is enough evidence to show, that when inequalities are perpetuated, they exist, they pre-exist, and they are bolstered by contemporary processes, then they also play themselves out in specifically gendered ways in the lives of the people, in the lives of women. And what happens then is that patriarchy comes to play in different ways at different levels. We tend to think that this patriarchy is mediated through individual actors. So, you will identify the individuals, the males around in your family, be it the husband, be it the brother, be it the father, be it other male relatives, as being the sort of people who are, in a sense, oppressors or who are blocking your paths to progress. The fact is that there is a larger social order which is being maintained both by the state, because these patriarchal policies, mindsets, these structurally embedded inequalities and patriarchies within those structures are replicated in public policy, they're replicated in state policy, they're replicated by the judiciary, which also sort of often adheres to those stereotypes. So your laws and judgments reflect those. And sort of the family, in a sense, is the unit through which that order is sort of implemented, enforced, and adhered to. And we all think the family is the institution where all this oppression is sort of happening in terms of discrimination and the blocking of avenues for more equal opportunities to girls, women, etc. The fact is that the family is, in a sense, of course, the basic unit of political economy, and the family is playing that out. It is the vehicle and the chief institution through which socialization is happening, socialization of men and socialization of women. Now, if we do not identify the structural roots, linkages of these the manner in which this social change is happening, what happens is we see it through the individual sort of mode, and the media then projects it as that there is a possibility to move out by highlighting success stories. Now, success is always to be welcomed. Individual stories of facing up to challenges and making it, breaking the glass ceiling are always welcome and to be upheld. But the fact is that structural weaknesses, structural prejudices, structural obstacles cannot be overcome in any meaningful way in terms of larger societal processes of social change without addressing those basic structures. We can individually make it, perhaps. Some of us can make it, some of us may not make it. But that individual success story will remain an individual success story. It may not allow for changes and sort of substantive shifts in the status quo. So what we are saying is that whereas the Constitution promises equality, it legally upholds equality. It makes it justiciable. You can appeal to the courts, and the courts may, hopefully, rule in your favor in terms of more equal terms of citizenship. However, they may not always do so, and there are judgments of all kinds. But in terms of societal change and meaningful long-term shifts, they may not happen unless we address the deeper linkages and structures within which these inequalities are integrally sort of maintained, and then they further multiply in terms of other forms of inequality. So women are also not a homogeneous category. We are all men and women, but we are not all men and women equally so. We are disadvantageously or unequally placed vis-a-vis access to resources. For instance, the tribal communities and women in the tribal communities are facing a tremendous loss of resources, which is leading to what we call unprecedented forms of migration. Why am I talking about it? In the recent pandemic, you found migration was staring you in the face, a phenomena which no one wanted to recognize till today. The state sort of expressed its inability, stated in parliament that we do not have data on migration, whereas we know that, I mean, what? Even to say that 150 million people are migrants, even that may be an understatement. Even economists have estimations of who could be a migrant. How does migration relate to women? I'll give you just 2 or 3 anecdotal stories, and anecdotes are never sufficient to tell us what is happening. But just 3 examples. There was Jamalu Maktam, a teenage girl who died some 14-15 kilometers from her home in Bijapur, having worked on for almost 6 to 9 months on a chili farm, and she was walking home with a neighbor woman who she had accompanied to earn her livelihood, to earn her sustenance, and she died because she was walking hours and hours, days and days, and she was a teenage girl, a tribal girl who was in that state. There was Arvina Khatun, whose visual you would have all seen. You know, this child at the platform was trying to wake up his dead mother. And Arvina Khatun again was from Bihar. She had migrated to Surat, was coming back in one of those special trains with nothing to eat, with nothing to survive on, and she died on the way. And there was that very sort of painful visual we all saw of this dead woman lying, whose 1.5-year-old child was trying to wake her up. Similarly, you had, as I said, a success story. The success story of, I think it was Jyoti Paswan, who cycled 1200 kilometers carrying her father home. He was ill, he was, I think, disabled by then because of some health issues, and she cycled. So the whole press, of course, very correctly highlighted that story. The point is, in the migration story, are we looking at women? Are we talking about gender aspects in migration? Is the government addressing the policies vis-a-vis sort of gender sensitivity? Even the advisories. I have looked at almost all the advisories which the government issued during the pandemic on migrants. There was no specific sort of concern about the fact that there were women who were moving. Okay, they may have been 10%, they may have been 20% of this larger story of migration, but they had specific needs. They had specific reproductive health needs. They were health needs. Was any attempt made to address them? Why am I raising it? Till we recognize the problem, we will not address it. All of you are students. You're going to launch out in your lives, maybe studying further, maybe examining data, maybe analyzing data and empirical facts. Please keep all these. There is a gender aspect and gender story to every aspect, to every sphere. Women do not live on another planet. They live in this society. All changes in our society impact the lives of women, and any aspect of social change, any aspect of social life that you study, that you sort of interface with, there is a gender dimension to it, and we have to keep it in mind. At the same time, we have to keep in mind that gender, as I said, women do not live in some outer world. They live in this life. So every aspect that affects the lives of the people affects women, and it affects them in more specifically gendered ways. So,
Which,
it be,
excuse me, ma'am.
yeah,
Thank you so much for covering so much ground in talking about women's rights and their entitlement and the whole discourse, and how there is also a false discourse or anti counter narrative. So there are too many questions from our attendees. So
okay,
we'll request you to take some of those questions if the time
okay,
permits. Yeah,
okay.
Karina and Anushka.
Yes, ma'am. So we have the first question from Sneha Singh. She says that, ma'am, we witness these days that under the garb of projecting perfect female bodies on digital media, there is yet another gruesome objectification of women's bodies like never before. Is there a way to counter this? And how tough or easy do you think this is empowerment like in the digital era?
Is there a related question?
There is another, yeah, there is a related question. So, actually, that is my question. You talked about how there is a gender gap and how, there's educated unemployment as well. So, what I wanted to ask about that was, what role do you think the media is playing in portraying, brave women who fight against poverty and, who are underpaid and yet they, come out progressive and yet they come out powerful at the end of the day. So, do you think media has, in some way, a role in upholding the patriarchal notion that leads to the gender pay gap?
Look, media plays the role that all other spheres. The media is equally rooted, entrenched also in terms of the corporate sector, the goals, so objectification or digital options. There are new forms. These have become new sites of sort of perpetuation of violence. And cybercrime is another aspect which I had planned to talk about. What I'm saying is that we are seeing a sort of complex situation of uh, a formal juridical recognition of rights, denial of substantive equality, denial of equality in the substantive spheres, and new sites of conflict, new arena of discrimination which are happening. And I think that's where the discussion is not happening. Some discussion happens on the media, but it borders on the sensational very often. And the one area where there is a visible sort of concern, but there is no openness, and no openness in terms of discussion, is the area of choice, freedom, individual freedoms, love, sexuality. Why am I talking about this? Because these have been put behind a smokescreen of sort of a discourse on how Indian culture is so favorable to women. There are these divine entities, and women in India have always been worshipped, etc. Nevertheless, we see the reality, which is totally different, of increasing vulnerabilities, increasing hazards in terms of daily life, the lack of security, safety. And it just doesn't affect only women, it affects all our relationships. There is no willingness and openness to discuss this whole area of relationships. So, what happens then is that the media picks it up only when there is an element of crime, and this lack of openness and discussion is sort of pushing it towards crime. Because there is violence not only in the social sphere and in the public sphere, but there is violence in the private sphere as well. Now, since there is no openness and there is no sensitivity in the law, despite the best laws that the women's movement has managed to get on paper, the law and the implementation of the law is caught up within this overall sort of ideology of upholding patriarchy in the name of status quo, in the name of social order. The media tries to sort of do a tightrope walk, with some people pushing towards some more debate. The fact is that there is no debate on many of these issues. That is why you see the phenomena of honor crime. You see the phenomena of now recognition of honor crime in the form of sort of laws and ordinances which talk about love jihad. Now, I mean, in any country in the 21st century, for the state to want to sort of enforce diktats in terms of who you should marry, on what lines you should marry, whether be it caste or religion, I think this is directly in conflict with the goals that the Constitution promises to us. And I think we need much more debate, and especially amongst the youth. The youth have to, because it's your freedoms, your choices, your rights which are going to be curbed in this manner. So what we have is there is an aspiration towards democracy, but a larger climate which is thwarting those debates, not allowing an openness of discussion, be it about gender, gender identity, diversity, any number of. Shubha in her opening remarks talked about pluralism. However, what we are finding is that all the way from the top, there is an imposition of a singularly sort of constructed model of women, womanhood, nationhood, and I think that is coming at cross purposes with the aspirations and the changes that are happening on the ground. So then you don't want to discuss the changes, you want to push them under the carpet. Then how does it come out? It comes out when it flares up in an incident of violence. And that is when the media steps in, because the media is not looking at your lives on a daily basis. It's stepping in either when it's crime or through its soap opera soaps, which are only perpetuating very sort of stereotypical caricatures of women, scheming, plotting women, a sleaze of crime and sort of conspiracy, which is becoming the norm to approach these issues. So I would say we really need to look at these differently. There is need, we're in a complex state of social progress and urbanization, which is leading to new kinds of situations where men and women are caught in different situations, and we need to be more open to discuss those, to confront those. Otherwise, they become more oppressive. I mean, the kind of mental health issues that we are facing today, which we don't want to recognize, those are the issues that are then coming up. And I think the future that you want to build, the more sort of gender-friendly future, if you wish to build that, then I think there is no running away from these. But these debates can happen and can progress only when there is an atmosphere of a more open, secure. You have to feel secure to be able to disagree, to dissent, to raise questions, many more questions. I would say your generation has to raise many more questions because they are new questions for you. It's not the same challenges as our times. It's a different generation. It's a different context. The socio-political, historical, cultural context is different. And there may not be any one answer. There will be diverse strategies. There have to be. For a country as vast as India, so diverse, both in terms of caste, class, gender, context, it has to be diverse. It has to be pluralistic. Any attempt to pose custom and tradition as the norm, I don't think it will work. I mean, you're talking about modernization, but you want to go for modernization without modernity in terms of attitudes, in terms of viewpoints, in terms of approaches to approach the issues that you face. I think those are the real challenges. And I think we need much more intense, frank discussion on these issues.
Ma'am, I have a small question.
Yeah.
People who talk about women's rights, they are often labeled as feminists and then man haters. And I mean, there are various derogatory terms used to describe people, but the term that is largely used is feminist. Okay, and again, we see that it is disparaging. And what do you think? What does feminism mean in the Indian context? Does it have any relevance in the Indian society?
Look, this is a very large question. It has international ramifications. It has our own. I have a personal view on it, and I have a larger understanding of it. To my mind, feminism has become a ready catch-all word for a discussion and a reference to women's rights. Feminism, the origins of feminism lie in what we call bourgeois feminism. The bourgeois feminism was only one strand. Just as in the national movement, the Congress was one strand. There was a larger anti-imperialist struggle in which there were various other formations. Similarly, in the women's movement, there are multiple strands. Even when you study feminism, you already study it. I mean, so there are about 1,000 feminisms already. Okay, I mean, there's no time, so I can't go into that. My point is that word has emotive appeal particularly to the middle class. It has nothing beyond the middle class as far as Indian women are concerned. I mean, it's far removed from the lives of rural women, far removed from the lives of the poor. It has emotive appeal, and it has a sort of resonance of a political mobilization for women's rights amongst our sections. However, the word is thoroughly inadequate, because I mean, why am I talking about 1,000 feminisms? I'm saying the word doesn't mean anything beyond a pro-women approach. So you have radical to convey something, liberal to convey something, black feminism to convey something, in India Dalit feminism to convey, which means that the word is inadequate. It is inadequate to capture the complex social reality and realities within which women's rights are being negotiated. Personally, I have always, because the times that I grew up in, the times where we embraced some of these ideas and engaged with them in the 1970s, we were definitely more radical, not as radical feminists, but in terms of radical political alternatives. And we definitely associated, many in my generation associated feminism with bourgeois feminism. There was, of course, socialist Marxist feminism, which also evolved, and some of the best writing, best ideas, concepts emerged from there. In India, many of us and the mass organizations of women have by and large had a troubled sort of relationship with feminism. I have particularly never found it adequate to capture the vast sort of energy, the vibrancy of the women's movement in India. Therefore, I have always, I hardly ever use the term feminism to construct the frames within which the women's movement in India can be understood, can be studied, can be tracked, within which the struggles and the myriad struggles that women in India have launched and continue to be a part of. I have found the term feminism hugely inadequate. I have written about it also. I think even in terms of methodologies in women's studies, for instance, I have always argued that we need to talk of research methodologies in women's studies rather than a feminist research methodology, because I think a methodology and a single feminist research methodology will be totally inadequate to understand, even to begin to analyze the complex social reality of Indian society. That's my take on it. Of course, we have disagreements, and I think those disagreements, differences, debates are what take us forward. The debates take us forward on concrete as well as in conceptual terms. So, for instance, on surrogacy, on sex work, on sex trafficking, on sexuality, on gender identity, there are debates galore. And I think we need many more of those debates. We may argue the debates may sometimes in the movement also get acrimonious. I mean, I can't say that all debates are only carried on in seminar halls and conferences. In the movement, you have to take decisions. What is the slogan? What is the demand you go with? So there is acrimony. But over decades, I mean, all my colleagues and friends in the movement, we have become friends. I mean, people who I have argued with on rape, and rape as an autonomous issue in 1981 in the first Women's Studies Conference. I correspond with them every day because we have to appreciate our differences, we have to appreciate our contributions. And I think one of the healthiest outcomes of these last 4 or 5 decades of debates has been that the debates from the feminists in India, feminists meaning the autonomous feminists who set themselves out with a particular agenda, and the left-oriented mass organizations in India who were in the larger movement making things which tried to change the laws, the terms on which women were leading their lives. I think that debate between the feminists and the sort of, to use a no, absence of a better word, the Marxist or left-oriented women's organizations has been the most enriching. The history of the women's movement in India has been most enriched by these debates, which were very intense. I mean, for us, they were real. They were real in terms of where you made your friends and where you drew the line. But I can say that at my age now, after 40, 50 years of those debates, we're all friends. We work together because we realize that we're all in the same movement. We're all working towards the same goals, same objectives, maybe with different standpoints. That's part of it. We have to make it more inclusive. I think the Dalit standpoint, Dalit feminist question has really put pressure on the women's movement, and it's a very creative, constructive pressure.
Um,
I
so
I would
sorry.
go with more such debates. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have a lot of questions, and I completely understand that it's very difficult to answer these vast questions in such a short period of time. But we're a little short of time. So, Karina, if you don't mind, can we go ahead with the next question right now?
Yes, definitely. Ma'am, one of the questions that we got was why do you think the government didn't put much thought into women related issues when it came to migration? Is it also because we have lack of women representatives in the government?
It's mixed. It's mixed. The fact is, when we think of farmers, for instance, we don't think of women. It is a fact. The whole slogan of land to the tiller, land reform, nobody till the 90s. Actually, it was in the sixth 5-year plan that the women intervened. I remember all of us, we were still very young in our late 20s, I think, at that time, probably, or just getting to be, I think, approaching 30, that we went to the Planning Commission and we said, look, what are you planning for women? Veena Mazumdar led the lot, of course. She was a pioneer in women's studies and in thinking about women in the policy domain. So there was, and we went to Professor Swaminathan, who was heading the Planning Commission there, and we had a very long debate, and there were various aspects. One was nobody thinks of it, firstly. So you have to sort of physically sort of push yourself in open the door and say, look, we exist, we are here. Swaminathan was much more open to those debates. But there were officers sitting there in his team, I remember, and CWDS files had letters from some of these, like as high as secretary level, saying, no, we can't think of a women-oriented approach because we in India believe in a family-oriented approach. And if we start talking about women, we will be breaking our family. So you have a letter where the secretary from one of the ministries is actually saying, no, we can't think of women. And then we had to show how women were amongst the poorest, and if any strategy for poverty eradication had to be devised, then you had to address women. So the sixth 5-year plan in official documents, if we are talking about, is one of the first documents which has a chapter on women, thanks to these interventions by the women's movement. And from that time onwards, basically post-emergency, there is this resurgent women's movement, some rethinking happens. some debates start in discussions on, there was a task force on employment and on rural employment. Then, for instance, your national labor commissions and the rural labor commissions, efforts were made. There was Ila Bhatt and others. So the Shram Shakti, the Commission on Unorganized Informal Economy Women, that report was very, very crucial. So some discussion happens. It also happens around the National Perspective Plan, which was Rajiv Gandhi's time. But it is in times when there is an openness in terms of policy discussions that you can intervene. Successive governments have set up task forces on various issues. For instance, till a few years ago, there was a whole task force on unpaid work, measuring unpaid work. Or for instance, we had debates with the censors, with the NSSO on categories. How do you define work? How to incorporate women's work in the definitions and therefore in what you see as SNA, the Systems of National Accounting. There was also international debates around those, but also we had our own debates, and you'll find some of those arguments in articles in the EPW by Beena Agarwal, by Nata Daburi. Various people wrote, Maitri Krishnaraj, to talk about women's work categories, etc. Unpaid work, for instance, since the last 20 years, time use surveys have been done. Indira Hirbe has been part of many of those discussions. My own colleague Neeta was on the task force. There have been task force on tribals, agricultural workers, or agrarian issues. On some of us have been members of some of those committees, or the socio-economic caste census that was there during the planning commission and one of the last rounds of the planning. The issue is that there has to be an openness, better data. Till the 90s, you had no data on crime and violence. It is the pressure from the women's movement which brought in the category of crimes against women in your NCRB data in 1995 or so. Before that, dowry death was not a category. Even now, for instance, I'll just talk about two things. When you say sensitivity, I have been having a discussion with the NHRC saying we should ask the NCRB to also enlist when a secondary level of crime, but not a secondary level in terms of a lower level of crime, happens after a rape complaint is lodged. You may have seen last week a headline saying the father of this girl was killed. Now, in our data, it will not show that this woman complained of a sexual assault and then her family was attacked or her father was killed. They will be two separate crimes. That linkage will not be established. But we need to have data which gives us those linkages. We need to have data which gives us those linkages in terms of, say, for instance, this whole debate about Dalit women being attacked. Do we have data which says, okay, so many? Now we have data on child sexual assault, so some things are improved. But those dialogues need to happen. But similarly, for instance, this whole discussion on women's studies, when we were students, there was no women's studies. We did not undergo training in women's studies. So the debate started outside and the women's movement got involved in it. And that is how the University Grants Commission, and all of you see UGC as this top body sort of, which of course is itself may be undergoing change as institution of what? Higher education, HEFA, whatever the new education policy is talking about. But the UGC had Professor Madhuri Shah at that time, who had been Vice Chancellor of SNDT Women's University, where the first conference on women's studies took place. And it is through dialogue and discussions with people like Madhuri Shah, Professor Armaiti Desai, that we introduced women's studies in your formal domain, your WDCs as you call them in Delhi University, as well as the women's studies centers, was set up around the mid-80s through those dialogues and debates. But for that, the policy establishment has to be open and sensitive to debate. For instance, on Narega, there was no clause on women. It was ADWA, it was CWDS, which gave memoranda and appeared before the Parliamentary Standing Committee saying that women are anyway losing jobs, the work participation rates are going down, and we need to have reservation for women in Narega. Now that committee heard us, and the committee opted for a reservation clause saying a minimum of so many beneficiaries should be women. Now, the same thing had happened in 93-94 with the 33%. But we all know that while panchayats and local bodies was passed, but on legislatures, the assemblies and parliaments, that bill has been hanging fire since 1996. In 1996, you had the Geeta Mukherjee committee report in parliament, which was a consensus report saying reservation for women should be there. Now, this is also a tricky issue. Why should reservation be there? Because we have to recognize that the normal process is not bringing women in, even though in the Constituent Assembly, Renuka Ray had very clearly taken the position on behalf of women saying we don't want reservation. But if 70 years of independence tells you that women are not going to come because they don't have muscle power, they don't have money power, they don't have assets to go and fight the kind of elections and the resources required, so then how will women come in? And who will bring the women in? Since all your coalition politics is happening on the numbers game, you're going for winnability. If you're going for winnability, you're not thinking on who's maybe a good candidate. You think who will garner the votes. So, I mean, there are positives to the electoral democracy, but we need to address the challenges that electoral democracy is throwing up. And women lose out at all levels because they are amongst the poorest of the poor. Dalit women lose out because they're even sort of poorest amongst the poor. Tribal women lose out because they're equally. And you were talking about migration. Let me tell you that they face prejudice even when they go back. The women in Tirupur, the whole belt, the garment textile belt in South India, that Coimbatore, Erode, Dharmapuri, Namakkal, Salem, that belt, or the young tribal migrant women who come out as domestic workers all over the country. But in Delhi itself, you may have more than 5-6 lakh for all you know. Nobody has the figures. Nobody has the figures, even though the Jharkhand women have been working around those issues for a long time. Government itself says it has no data. But when these women go out, the social prejudice, because you have a climate of social prejudice which is moving in a more retrogressive direction. Then these women face further prejudice, saying ये तो पता नहीं कहाँ कहाँ होके आए हैं, इनका क्या life रहा है, So they face social prejudices even when they go back, whereas they've been suffering conditions of exploitation, oppression, all kinds of harassment, including vulnerability, much greater vulnerability to sexual harassment in all these sections. But you don't want to talk about it. And when you talk about it, these great people in power, they can take you to court for defamation, So you can imagine if Priya Ramani can be taken to court on defamation, that poor domestic worker who faces hazards and vulnerabilities at every step, what is her locus standi? How will she go and challenge this system? And on top of that, you make a law. The Vishaka judgment was so good, it at least provided a framework for addressing this. Then you get a 2013 law, which actually has a clause which the women's organizations have systematically opposed. Systematically. The clause says that a false complaint will lead to penalty of the complainant. Now, a complaint which cannot be proven is not always a false complaint. We all know that. We need to know that if we don't know that. And the policy establishment and government and state should know that. Even in that sexual harassment law, it is the women's organizations who had to push, saying that the largest segment of women workers are in the unorganized sector. If your law is not going to address the unorganized sector women, then who is it going to address? So we had to push for those district complaints committees, etc., the whole network. Now, what I'm saying is women's organization, you people see the protests in terms of individual instances and reactions. But there is another segment and another level of activity which women's organizations and the movement has engaged with now systematically from 1977, I can say, to try and push for changes and greater sensitivity within the laws, within the policies that are drawn up, and to engage with those issues at every level, saying you must have women on these committees, as was the question posed. Sometimes you get a favorable response, a positive response. Sometimes you have to really push your way through. So you can have population policies which are totally insensitive and under pressure from our international donors and grantees. You know, we all tend to think, I mean, of course, the international thing is seen as a foreign hand in contemporary political circles. But we have to understand there is an international lobby which sees India sitting on a population bomb. It tries to attribute all poverty and all our poor indicators to this population bomb. And in that story, women are the worst villains of the piece because they produce babies. So you can have every, you know, now you're familiar with this word of clinical trials because of COVID, etc. But women have been the worst, at the worst end of being guinea pigs. In India, there was only one attempt at targeting men for population control. That was during the emergency. We all know Mrs. Gandhi's government fell. There was tremendous opposition. After that, no government has ever addressed male contraception issues. All the trials,
Absolutely,
we,
ma'am. I'm very,
yeah,
very sorry to interrupt, but as we're short of time,
sure.
I would just like to, on behalf of everyone who's present here, thank you for your wonderful viewpoints that you've projected today. How you talked about how in the preamble itself it talks about gender equality, but we have not been able to do so. However, you also talked about people such as Ela Bhatt and others who have worked towards this and fought their way to make us reach where we are right now. These points were extremely stimulating and thought provoking, and I would now like to invite Dr. Shubha Dwivedi ma'am to please come and thank you on our behalf.
Okay, I'll just say one thing. Thank you very much. Thank you for a more interactive session, which is always better than a monologue. And thank you for this forum. I'll be happy to interact again further. Fine.
Privilege and honor to have you here, ma'am, and thanks for sharing your expansive knowledge with us. Due to paucity of time, we could not take more questions, but believe me, the chat box is full of questions at this moment. And we are going to direct those questions to your inbox, to your
Yes, that
mailbox,
way.
and then you can, satisfy their queries. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking out time for today's Youth Summit. Thank you very much.
And Shubha, I would have loved to listen to more of you, but I have certain things to attend to. So I'm going to take your leave after this. I'm sorry. I would have loved to hear more. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
Uh, Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on, we would like to give the stage to the next set of moderators, Deepak Kumar and Hira Mustafa.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible and visible.
Am I audible and visible?
Confirm it.
Yes, Deepak, you are audible and visible as well. Am I audible and visible?
Yeah, Hira, you're both audible.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. The next session is of Dr. Meetu Khosla ma'am. She's going to be talking about how psychology is so critical to the mental well-being of all individuals and especially of youth, and how it's still considered a taboo to talk about it, and how, especially in the context of the pandemic, how psychological issues have manifested themselves in various ways, and the repercussions of it on the well-being of individuals. So I am Deepak Kumar, and I am the secretary of Nimbus. I am pursuing BSc Electronics. I'm in second year, and it gives me immense